You don't expect people to die in a flood.
Oh my God!
This is so big.
The water is so intense.
I'm Ginger Z, Chief Meteorologist at ABC News, and I want to welcome you to our ABC News Live Climate Special. It's called The Year of Extremes, and boy, has it been, even here in New York City. But we brought you here because that green building with the glass, that's the United Nations, founded on global cooperation, something that leaders that just met there say we are going to have and have urgently if we want to address the climate crisis. But we don't need a climate summit like the one coming up in Glasgow, which is important and called COP26, by the way. We just don't need it individually to know that we are living the change. Everything from the deepening drought to the erratic wildfires to the flash flooding that we saw here in New York City and even the rapid intensification of hurricanes. It's happening. Now, I understand climate change did not make natural disasters. They've always been with us. But human-induced climate change has magnified it. The science has been telling us for decades, and now we are living it. The question is, what are we going to do about it?
The UN issues its alarming new climate report, calling it a, quote, code red for humanity, warning the Earth is warming much faster than they thought.
Painting a dire picture of what the future may look like.
Unprecedented events are now becoming common, and scientists all point to one thing.
Unequivocally, humans are causing climate change, and some of our most extreme weather events have a link to that change.
Deaths running from that historic heat wave in the Pacific Northwest.
Here on the street, this is measuring at 157 degrees. It feels like a furnace.
Drying up lakes and reservoirs that millions rely on for their water supply.
This time a year ago, this dock would have been about 30 feet underwater. It's now high and dry.
Madagascar, more than 1 million people facing starvation there.
It is all because they are in a prolonged drought. When you bake the soil, when you bake the foliage, you are creating the perfect setup for a horrible fire season.
The people who live in this community had to run for their lives as the flames came through and burned their homes and their cars. There are nearly 50 burning in 6 western states.
Thousands of people forced to evacuate and firefighters surrounded by flames as they wrestle with the Dixie Fire, destroying the entire town of Greenville.
All around, just complete destruction that goes on for blocks and blocks, completely unrecognizable.
A warmer planet means that we could have more extreme events.
July was the hottest month ever recorded.
The heat also fueling summer storms.
Elsa roaring ashore along the Gulf Coast.
Twister after twister zeroing in on Iowa.
Oh, look at that, look.
Dangerous flash flood conditions in Nevada and Arizona.
Oh my God, you guys!
In parts of western Germany, days of heavy rain wiping away entire communities.
There's so many people dead.
Flash floods in China killing at least 25 and displacing hundreds of thousands.
Forecasters warning more rain is on the way.
My island is on fire.
Apocalyptic fires raging across Greece as temperatures reach 113 degrees.
Siberia is normally one of the coldest places on the planet, but it's currently covered in wildfires. And for the first time in recorded history, smoke from those fires has even reached the North Pole.
In Turkey, flash floods caused by torrential rain, hundreds unaccounted for.
Torrential rain pounding southwest Japan.
Rescuers still searching for those missing after those devastating floods in Tennessee.
We were on the roof of our house.
Ida, one of the strongest hurricanes on record to hit Louisiana.
The dangerous Category 4 hurricane winds 130 miles per hour.
Oh, that roof is coming. Holy!
Catastrophic storm surge up to 8 feet.
This is a storm we're going to be talking about through the midweek and unfortunately throughout history.
Where does this head next? This will be felt across several states as it now moves north.
Tropical storm Ida barreled through the Northeast overnight.
Historic and deadly flooding.
NYPD officers braving a flooded basement in Queens, trying to rescue a family, including a toddler.
The walls of a New Jersey home caving in under pressure.
The cars are stuck and we have bodies underwater. We are now retrieving bodies.
Look at that tornado!
At least 7 confirmed tornadoes hitting the Philadelphia area and southern New Jersey.
We are in a whole new world now. Let's be blunt about it. The brutality of storms now, it is different.
Drought and wildfires are plaguing the western United States.
Firefighters battling out of control flames, desperate to keep the Caldor fire from taking over South Lake Tahoe.
I don't know how the conversation tonight, tomorrow, and beyond doesn't turn to how do we aggressively mitigate greenhouse gas emissions.
We can't undo the mistakes of the past. This generation can make the systemic changes that will stop the planet warming. And if we don't act, who will?
It's kind of hard to believe that that all happened this year, and a lot of it in the last couple of months. But those events were not surprises to meteorologists, and they weren't to climate scientists either. They've been warning about this for decades. So we spoke to one of those scientists who happens to be the senior advisor on climate for NASA, Gavin Schmidt. We not only talked about the science, but how you and me, even if we haven't lived one of those extremes yet, need to pay attention.
This is like 6 inches of rainfall within the last 3 hours.
Tornado!
I'm out of here.
We're seeing things happen and change that are clearly unprecedented in many millennia, and we have a good understanding of why. It's because of what we've been doing to the atmosphere, it's because of the burning of fossil fuels and the increases in greenhouse gases.
Everybody wants to say, yeah, what about the orbit? What about the sun? What about, and each one does have a part, just none so much or so closely paralleled with the increase in temperature as greenhouse gas emission.
We have no shortage of ideas for why climate might change. And over 4 billion years of Earth's history, the climate has changed for all of those reasons. And it turns out that the biggest thing is carbon dioxide and the other greenhouse gases.
There goes! There goes the other half of the roof! There goes there's the falls!
I recently covered Ida, and I was in New Jersey by a washed-out bridge.
Ginger is live in Demarest, New Jersey.
Cecilia, we would have had a storm without human-induced climate change. Of course, we've had storms forever, but behind me you see that road with the double yellow, the collapsed bridge, there were cars inside of it. You ask, how much have we amplified these storms? I related it to amplification by human-induced climate change. Now, scientists have called it global warming since the late 1800s.
I mean, our understanding of if we add carbon dioxide to the atmosphere, the planet will warm, dates to the 19th century.
Right.
Yeah. Details have been filled in, the calculations have been improved, everything's much more sophisticated, but that answer that they knew in the 1800s is still true now.
There's not one part of us that's saying fires, floods, tornadoes, hurricanes are the result of climate change, that they are amplified by climate change.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating topic. We can see things happening in the global average, right? So we've been able to see the global mean changes decade by decade have been getting warmer very, very clearly, unequivocal warming of the planet. But for a long time, people said, well, that's not really going to impact the weather. It's not really going to impact the storms because there's so much noise, right? There's so much chaos and there's so much randomness. We're not going to be able to detect that. But the fact of the matter is that we can now detect the changes that the global mean change is having, global warming is actually having on specific weather events. Of course, heat waves. Heat waves are becoming more frequent and greater in magnitude than they were before, right?
So take me to the background and tell me, what does the future of storms look like? What does the future of drought look like?
We're seeing more intense and longer lasting heat waves. We're seeing more intense rainfall. So when it is raining, it's raining stronger. We're seeing more category 3, 4, 5 hurricanes in the Atlantic. That seems to be driven by the overall warming of the main development region, the tropical Atlantic. We're seeing that when there is drought, the droughts are more intense because there's more of an evaporative demand. So the soil is drying out faster given the same amount of rainfall change.
How do we make people care that don't have a sea level rising, how does this connect to people?
We have to talk to people where they are, what their issues are. You know, I mean, sea level is a much bigger deal in Florida, in Newport, and in Chesapeake Bay, and in Louisiana than it is in Nevada, obviously, right? And so things that are happening in the Arctic, the connection there to sea level is very, very real. You don't need to play games to explain that what happens a long way away is making a difference right here and now.
Gavin and I also spoke about the Arctic, warming at 3 times the rate than anywhere else on the planet. And I know you've probably abstractly heard about melting glaciers and then sea level rise, but maybe you don't know what it means to you. Well, James Longman went to the Arctic Circle, to Greenland, to help us understand. On top of that, the other thing that always comes up is China. So they make double the greenhouse gas emissions than we do in the US. We got to talk to somebody who has their ear, the climate czar for the White House, John Kerry. In one of the most remote places in the world, there is a disaster happening every minute of every hour of every day. Now, our James Longman went all the way to Greenland, to the Arctic Circle, to show us this silent catastrophe.
Greenland, the world's largest island, known for its vast tundra and mammoth glaciers. But this beautiful Arctic desert is retreating.
I'm standing right in front of the Russell Glacier here in Greenland, part of Greenland's melting ice sheet. And really what happens here is at the heart of the climate crisis.
We headed for this Arctic front line to camp out on the ice and link up with a group of scientists and locals to see this changing world up close.
This is Greenland's ice sheet. It makes up something like 85% of the whole of Greenland. Where we're standing, the ice is something like 60 meters thick. In some places, it's as thick as 2 miles.
Lars Logstrup took me on a quad bike to the edge of the Russell Glacier. Life here is rugged, to say the least. He spent 20 years watching things change.
I'm a dog sledge owner, have my own dog sledge. When I was driving dog sledge here 20 years ago, it was for 7 months. Now it's only for 5 months because the season is getting lower, the summer is getting warmer, but also more rain is coming down and a lot of things are changing.
So you've lost 2 months of snow in 20 years?
Yes.
So if on that same trajectory in the next 20 years, you could only have 3 months of snow left?
Yeah, we are fearing that.
The ice in the Arctic is crucial to regulate the temperatures of the world. And it's not just an increase in temperatures that's causing them to melt.
This is one of the most extraordinary walks I've ever been on. Walking through Greenland's ice sheet. And it's absolutely stunning. The dark patches you can see, that is silt, that is ground down rock that's coming up from underneath the ice. Thousands of years old. But further in, there's something called black ice.
If you change the color of the ice, then it's capable of absorbing almost all of the radiations. And it's becoming blacker because of the materials that we've been putting into the atmosphere. Some of that's natural through dust from the global deserts. Some of it's man-made directly, such as the pollutants from the burning of fossil fuels. The forest fires that we've seen across the world, including Siberia, liberate material onto the ice sheet.
Richard Washington is a professor of climate science at the University of Oxford, and he tells us to take note of one small but very important element of our day. It's raining, when really it should be snowing. Rain here is rare, and at the centre of the ice cap last month, rain was recorded for the first time ever.
What's it like for you being here, seeing all this?
Well, for 20 years, each of 20 years, I've been teaching about the Greenland ice sheet and its role in the climate system. And for the first time, here I am standing on it on a rainy day, would you believe, with the ice melt passing underneath us. So it's quite a moment.
What you're looking at here is just ice melt. That's water running off Greenland's ice sheet. There are only 2 ice sheets anywhere in the world, one in Antarctica and the other one here. And it's important that this happens because Greenland contributes 8% of the Earth's fresh water. What's not so good is that it happens so fast. The melt here is accelerating and it's contributing to the rise in global sea levels. So from London to New York, from New Orleans to Shanghai, what happens here in Greenland affects all of us.
The Arctic is the engine room of the climate system of the Earth. The Arctic is in the core, is the center, and controls much of the mechanisms that keep our climate system active.
Over the last 40 years, the speed of this ice retreat has astonished even the scientists we met. What lies ahead for this Arctic wilderness and around the world is unknown. There we go, research begins. But for Carlos Duarte, professor of marine science at King Abdullah University in Saudi Arabia, it is not too late. He's studying ways to reverse and stop global climate change, and he says the signs of it are all around us. We went up over the Russell Glacier to get a better look. These stunning turquoise melt lakes are a sign of deterioration on the ice sheet. The buildup of water creates these massive sinkholes.
If you are scientists working on marine ecosystems, working on the biosphere and ecology, you need to face climate change.
The answer, he says, could be in the mud beneath the ice. Duarte says as the ice retreats, it leaves mud churned up from the billion-year-old rock below. That mud, he hopes, is chemically unique and can trap carbon. His proposal, transfer massive amounts of this special mud into the ocean to keep it from releasing more climate-warming carbon into the atmosphere.
It's almost like the Earth is giving you the medicine it needs. You just have to go and find it.
You have to go and find it.
While Duarte tries to heal the ice, those who call Greenland home hope the world is paying attention.
Do you feel like the world is listening to you?
They haven't for a long time, but I do sense that things are changing.
A need to be heard and an increasing call to take action before a critical international summit this fall.
I think we have a choice to make here. Do we want to allow the temperatures to continue increasing and have a very negative effect on, for example, agricultural production, on our health systems? Do we want to allow our children to walk into a broken planet, broken environment where they will not be able to thrive? Or do we want to make the changes that are necessary in order to open possibilities that are much better for us? Because here's the thing that we have to remember. This is not about saving the planet. Frankly, the planet has been around for 4.5 billion years. And she started without us. She didn't ask us for any opinion, okay? She has been around and she will continue. If we are stupid enough to press the button on the ejector seat and make Earth uninhabitable for us, she will continue perfectly happily without us. This is not about saving the planet. This is about ensuring that the conditions, the environmental conditions that have made this planet habitable for us, that they actually continue. That is what this is about.
Wow. Thank you, James. This wouldn't be a climate special unless somebody said save the planet. But we really shouldn't be saving the planet. The planet's going to be fine. We should be saving ourselves and life as we know it, or that we can live it comfortably. And that's why we wanted to talk about leadership, because we're going to need it. And we spoke to the Special Presidential Envoy for Climate, John Kerry. He is someone who will have big stakes and tells us about them in that big summit coming up in Glasgow.
The world will step up.
John Kerry, Vietnam War veteran, former presidential candidate, a U.S. senator for nearly 2 decades, then Secretary of State, and today, he's President Biden's climate czar, taking on one of the biggest challenges of his career. President Biden used the words, people need to bring their highest ambitions to COP26.
To keep within our reach the vital goal of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, every nation needs to bring their highest possible ambitions to the table.
Ambition without action is fantasy. How do we go from fantasy and make sure that doesn't happen and get measured result from 2 weeks in Glasgow?
Glasgow's not the end of the road. It's the best opportunity we have. Why? Because this is the moment that the scientists told us we have now about 9 years within which to make the most important decisions that get us there. This is the test really of the foundation of the United Nations, of the whole notion of community on an international basis, of countries helping other countries. President Xi of China made a very important announcement that China is no longer going to fund any coal-fired power plants externally outside their country. That sends a terrific message.
Sure.
And President Xi is to be congratulated for stepping up now. I hope China will do more.
Well, that's what, when I saw that announcement, you know, not investing abroad and helping develop green energy in other countries that are developing is wonderful. But how does that weigh out with dozens of new coal-fired power plants within China?
Well, they're still looking at that. I know they're trying to examine what their peak level will be for emissions. They feel like they didn't have other alternatives, and they therefore grew the coal while they had to grow their economy. And my hope is that President Xi is going to help us all to come together around certain choices we can each make.
I think within the U.S., people feel more hope, but then their mind and words always go to China. And so they'll often ask me, and I say, I don't have a word with China, but you do, and you just came back again. Do you feel when you go there is good faith that things will actually happen? Because if you hear 2060, we're going to be carbon neutral by then, but then you see the investment in fossil fuel, it is very hard for me or anyone else to see that add up. Like, what are we missing?
I mean, it obviously, we all need to do faster. Every country has to go faster. None of us can say we're really fast enough. There are a few countries, you can get them on one or two hands, that are in keeping with the Paris numbers. Most countries, we have a long way to go. But the 191 countries that have all put in their plans together, whether they've changed them, improved them, or kept them the same, that 191 result in a 16% increase in emissions. That is a big F. That fails. Fails for everybody. We're going to keep negotiating, working with countries in order to try to bring them on board. And as you know better than anybody, because you're a trained meteorologist, we are contributing to this.
Yes.
Human beings are
no question.
responsible for this accelerated process of deterioration. And it will take us making basic choices to get us back on track. The good thing is we can do this.
I have a weekly segment. It's called It's Not Too Late, for that very reason, because I firmly believe it's not, and I know scientifically it's not.
You don't want people to wake up in the morning and say, I don't want to get out of bed, and they go home. And if you really sit and take in all of the potential negatives.
In the climate crisis.
In the climate crisis, some people just freeze and they say, I don't know what to do. That's bigger than me. I can't be individually responsible for that. Someone else is going to have to fix it, or some technology is going to roll along that's going to fix it. I hope so. But in the absence of that, you've got to apply the precautionary principle of living and of governing.
There are benchmarks, as you said, 9 years, 1.5. Why not be more aggressive then than 1.5? Because it's just not realistic? Or
You've got to be realistic where the science can let you go here. We're not doing this because Joe Biden has a philosophy. Or because, although his philosophy helps him to do it, but it's not because of that. It's not ideology, it's not politics, it doesn't have a label. It's science.
It's being billed as the best last chance to curb greenhouse gas emissions. But then the UN Secretary General says, hey, if we don't all come together and urgently, collectively make this change, there's a high risk of failure. So to you, what's the best outcome and what's the worst?
Well, the best outcome is that the 20 largest economies of the world will come together recognizing that they are responsible for 80% of all the emissions. So there is a special responsibility on the developed world. And if the developed world will step up, I have no question but that the rest of the world will be able to follow and to make choices that they can't otherwise make today. So we have to help them do that.
There will have to be financial help for the developing country. That's the part that really hasn't been followed through from Paris, is the money hasn't showed up.
President Biden took a huge step towards that by committing to double the amount that already had been doubled in order to show good faith to help leverage the production of the $100 billion from the whole world that needs to be made available to countries to make this happen.
Going back to those UN numbers with the 2.7 degrees expected by the end of the century, I think Greta Thunberg says this is what betrayal looks like. Whatever our so-called leaders are doing, they're doing it wrong. And it made us think about that. It is a beautiful image of you signing the Paris Agreement with your granddaughter Isabel on your lap, and that's just 5 years ago or so. Do you think that as a globe, the leaders have failed Isabel and her generation?
A lot of them have failed, but I think it's unfair. I think it's a little much of a reach to say that so-called leaders, there are a lot of real leaders around, and they are trying very, very hard to move this process. And I understand Greta's frustration and anger, which is, I feel the anger, same anger.
Mm-hmm.
People are getting in the way, some people. And what we need to do is behave like adults and get the job done. And she's absolutely right to be pressing the urgency of our doing that. But there are leaders out there trying to get some things done, just too slowly in some cases, and we've got to speed it up.
I'm looking forward to COP. I hope I get to be there for part of it.
Well, I hope you're there, and we look forward to seeing you.
You as well. Thank you. The world's leaders certainly have a huge job ahead of them in Glasgow, but that doesn't take the onus off of us. We have agency and responsibility. So what can we do to help? Well, we can vote for those leaders. We can vote with our dollar and just change things. Everything from our fashion to what we're eating to what we're driving. There are alternatives out there, and they're not sacrifices. In a lot of cases, they're upgrades. We just need to find equity in these alternatives. And once we do that, it really isn't too late. Thanks so much for joining us for the Year of Extremes. I'm Ginger Z. We'll see you in Glasgow.